The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Kate Middleton sat in her private study, staring at the official letter in her trembling hands. The royal seal felt heavier than usual, and the words on the cream-colored paper seemed to blur together as tears filled her eyes. After 12 years of marriage to Prince William, everything she had built was crumbling around her. The letter was from the palace's legal department, outlining the preliminary steps for what the media would soon call the separation of the decade. Kate had known this day might come, but she never imagined it would hurt this much. The woman who had gracefully handled royal duties, raised 3 beautiful children, and stood by William through countless public appearances was now facing the most private pain of her life. William entered the room quietly, his footsteps muffled by the thick Persian rug. He looked tired, older than his 41 years, with dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. Kate didn't look up when she heard him approach. She couldn't bear to see the same pain reflected in his blue eyes that she felt in her own heart. "Kate," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to talk about the children." She finally raised her head, and William felt his heart break all over again. Kate's usually bright eyes were red and swollen from crying, her face pale despite the makeup she had carefully applied that morning. She was still beautiful, still the woman he had fallen in love with at university, but now there was a sadness about her that cut him deeply. "George keeps asking why Daddy sleeps in the guest wing," Kate said, her voice shaking. "Charlotte heard the staff whispering yesterday. She asked me if we were getting divorced like her friend's parents. How do I explain this to an 8-year-old, William? How do I tell our children that their family is falling apart?" William moved closer, wanting to comfort her, but knowing that his touch might make things worse. They had been living like strangers in the same house for months now, their conversations limited to discussions about royal duties and the children's schedules. The easy intimacy they once shared had disappeared, replaced by polite distance and careful words. "I never wanted it to come to this," William said, running his hands through his hair. "You have to believe me, Kate. When we got married, I thought we could make it work. I thought love would be enough." Kate stood up slowly, smoothing down her navy dress. Even in her grief, she maintained the poise that had made her beloved by the British public. "Love was never the problem, William. You know that. It was everything else. The pressure, the expectations, the way your family treated me like an outsider even after all these years." The truth hung between them like a heavy curtain. Kate had tried so hard to fit into the royal family, to follow their traditions and protocols, to be the perfect princess the people expected. But it had come at a cost. She had lost pieces of herself along the way, becoming someone she barely recognized. William's phone buzzed on the desk, and they both glanced at it. Another meeting, another obligation, another duty that would pull him away from his family. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. He was second in line to the throne, destined to serve his country, but he was failing at serving his own family. "Camilla called this morning," Kate said quietly, turning to look out the window at the palace gardens where their children often played. She wanted to discuss the media strategy for the announcement. She seemed almost pleased about the whole situation. William's jaw tightened. His stepmother's relationship with Kate had never been warm, but lately it had grown openly hostile. Camilla had never fully accepted Kate into the inner circle of the royal family, always making subtle comments about Kate's middle-class background and questioning her decisions about the children's upbringing. "What did she say?" William asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Kate turned back to him, and he could see the hurt in her eyes. "She suggested that perhaps this was for the best, that some people are simply not meant for royal life. She said the family would support me in finding a suitable arrangement that would allow me to transition back to civilian life gracefully." The words stung because they echoed the doubts Kate had been carrying for years. Despite her public success and the genuine affection of the British people, she had never quite felt like she belonged in the royal family. There were unspoken rules, ancient traditions, and complex relationships that she was still learning to navigate even after more than a decade. "She had no right to say that to you," William said, anger flashing in his eyes. "You've been nothing but dedicated to this family and to your duties. You've been a wonderful mother and an incredible representative of the crown." Kate smiled sadly. "But it wasn't enough, was it? Not for them, and maybe not for you either." William wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but the words wouldn't come, because deep down, he knew there was some truth to what she was saying. He had changed since becoming heir apparent. The weight of future kingship had made him more distant, more focused on duty than on the woman who stood beside him through it all. The sound of children's laughter drifted through the window, and both parents turned toward the sound. George, Charlotte, and Louis were playing in the garden with their nanny, their innocent joy a sharp contrast to the sorrow filling their parents' hearts. "They deserve better than this," Kate whispered. "They deserve parents who can give them stability, who can show them what love looks like, not this cold arrangement we've become." William moved to stand beside her at the window, and for a moment they watched their children together in comfortable silence. It was the closest they had been in weeks, and William caught a hint of Kate's familiar perfume, the same one she had worn on their wedding day. "I want you to know," he said finally, "that leaving you is the hardest thing I've ever had to face. Harder than losing my mother. Harder than knowing I'll be king someday. You and the children, you're everything to me." Kate closed her eyes, feeling fresh tears threaten to fall. "Then why can't we make this work? Why does it feel like I'm fighting a losing battle every single day?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with years of accumulated hurt and misunderstanding. William knew the answer, but saying it out loud would make it real, final, irrevocable. "Because I'm not just your husband," he said quietly. "I'm the future king, and those two roles don't always align. I've been trying to serve both, and I've failed at both." Kate nodded slowly, understanding flooding her features. She had always known that marrying William meant marrying the institution, but she had been young and in love and certain that their feelings for each other would be enough to overcome any obstacle. "The children will spend weekends with you," she said, her voice becoming practical, businesslike. "I'll take them during the week. We'll coordinate schedules around your official duties. They don't need to see us like this anymore, William. They don't need to feel the tension every time we're in the same room." William felt something break inside his chest. The way Kate was already planning their separation, the calm efficiency with which she was dismantling their life together, made it all feel terrifyingly real. "Kate, don't," she interrupted gently. "Please don't make this harder than it already is. We both know this is the right thing to do. We've been pretending for too long, and it's not fair to anyone, especially not to George, Charlotte, and Louis." The formal use of their children's full names instead of the family nicknames felt like another small death. Kate was already creating distance, already protecting herself from more pain. A knock at the door interrupted them, and Kate quickly wiped her eyes, transforming herself back into the composed duchess the world expected to see. Her private secretary entered with a schedule of afternoon appointments, royal engagements that would require her to smile and make small talk and pretend that her world wasn't falling apart. "Your Royal Highness," the secretary said, addressing Kate with the formal title that had never quite felt natural to her. "The car will be ready in 20 minutes for your visit to the Children's Hospital." Kate nodded efficiently. "Thank you, Margaret. I'll be right down." After the secretary left, Kate turned back to William one last time. He looked lost, younger somehow, like the university student she had fallen in love with all those years ago before the weight of royal responsibility had settled on his shoulders. "I need to go," she said softly. "The children are counting on me to read to them at the hospital. They don't understand why adults make things so complicated." William watched as she gathered her purse and straightened her jacket, every movement practiced and graceful. Even in her pain, she was still thinking of others, still putting duty before her own feelings. "Kate," he called out as she reached the door. She paused but didn't turn around. "I want you to know that loving you was the easiest thing I ever did. Losing you is the hardest." Her shoulders shook slightly, and William knew she was fighting tears again. But when she spoke, her voice was steady. "Loving you was easy too," she said without turning around. "It's everything else that was impossible." And then she was gone, leaving William alone in the study with the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of their children's laughter echoing from the garden below. He sank into the chair Kate had vacated, picking up the legal documents that would formalize the end of their marriage. Outside, a car pulled up to take Kate to her appointment. She would smile for the cameras, hold hands with sick children, and give hope to families going through their own difficult times. She would be the perfect princess one more time, even as her own fairy tale was ending. William watched from the window as she emerged from the palace, her head held high despite everything she was going through. The photographers waiting at the gates had no idea that they were capturing one of the last images of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge as a married couple. As Kate's car disappeared down the long driveway, William felt the full weight of what they were losing settle over him like a heavy blanket. Soon, the whole world would know that their perfect royal marriage was over, that the couple who had seemed so happy and stable was separating. But for now, in this quiet moment, he allowed himself to grieve not just for the end of his marriage, but for the dreams they had shared, the future they had planned, and the family they were about to split apart. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and media statements and difficult conversations with his father and Camilla. Tonight, he just wanted to hold on to the memory of Kate's smile and the sound of their children's laughter. 3 weeks after the private conversation in William's study, the palace was buzzing with activity. Staff members moved through the corridors with unusual urgency, and security had been quietly increased around the perimeter. Today was the day the royal family would officially announce the separation of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. Kate stood in her dressing room, looking at herself in the full-length mirror one last time as a married woman. She had chosen a simple black dress, elegant but not dramatic, appropriate for what the palace was calling a personal statement requiring dignity and discretion. Her hands shook slightly as she applied her lipstick, the same shade she had worn to countless royal events where she had stood proudly beside William. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting her lady-in-waiting. Instead, Camilla entered the room, resplendent in a cream-colored suit with perfectly styled hair and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Kate's stomach tightened. Camilla rarely visited her private quarters, and her presence today felt particularly ominous. "Kate, darling," Camilla said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "How are you holding up? Such a difficult day for all of us." Kate turned to face her stepmother-in-law, maintaining her composure despite the anxiety churning in her chest. "I'm managing, thank you, Camilla. Is there something you needed?" Camilla moved further into the room, her eyes taking in the packed boxes that sat discreetly in the corner. Kate would be moving to a smaller residence within the next week, taking only her personal belongings and leaving behind the life she had built at Kensington Palace. "I wanted to speak with you before the announcement," Camilla said, settling herself in the velvet armchair by the window. "About the children and about your future." The word future was delivered with a particular emphasis that made Kate's skin crawl. She had learned to read Camilla's subtle manipulations over the years, and she could sense that this conversation was going to be unpleasant. "What about the children?" Kate asked, keeping her voice steady. Camilla's smile widened, but there was something cold behind it. "Well, naturally, the palace is concerned about their stability during this transition. Charles and I have been discussing the possibility of having them spend more time at Clarence House. A more traditional royal upbringing, you understand, away from all this disruption." Kate felt her blood turn to ice. "The children are staying with me during the week. William and I have already agreed on the arrangements." "Oh, but arrangements can change, can't they?" Camilla said lightly, examining her perfectly manicured nails. "Especially when one considers what's best for the future heirs to the throne. George, particularly, will need proper guidance as he grows older. The kind of guidance that comes from being fully immersed in royal traditions." The threat was subtle but clear. Kate realized that Camilla wasn't just here to gloat about the separation. She was here to establish dominance, to make it clear that Kate's influence over her own children would be limited now that she was no longer a working member of the royal family. "My children need their mother," Kate said firmly, her voice carrying a strength that surprised even her. "No amount of royal tradition can replace that." Camilla's expression shifted slightly, the mask of false concern slipping for just a moment. "Of course they need their mother, but they also need to understand their place in the world, their responsibilities. Sometimes, Kate, love isn't enough. Sometimes duty must come first." Kate recognized her own earlier conversation with William echoed in Camilla's words, and she realized this woman had probably been working behind the scenes to ensure the marriage would fail. The thought made her sick, but it also made her angry. "Is that why you're here?" Kate asked, her voice growing colder. "To tell me that my love for my children isn't enough? To remind me that I was never really one of you?" Camilla stood up slowly, smoothing her skirt with deliberate movements. "I'm here because I care about this family and because I want to make sure everyone understands their role going forward. You've done admirably, Kate, truly. But now it's time for you to step back gracefully and allow others to guide the children in the ways of royal life." The condescension in her tone was unmistakable now, and Kate felt 12 years of suppressed frustration finally bubble to the surface. She had been polite, deferential, and accommodating for over a decade, always trying to fit into a family that had never truly accepted her. But she was done being polite. "My role," Kate said, her voice quiet but fierce, "is to be a mother to my children. That doesn't change because you've decided my marriage isn't convenient anymore." Camilla's eyebrows rose slightly, as if she was surprised by Kate's defiance. "Your marriage failed because you couldn't adapt, Kate, because you insisted on clinging to your middle-class sentimentalities instead of embracing what it truly means to be royal. William needs someone who understands the weight of the crown, not someone who sees it as a burden." The words hit their mark, cutting deep into Kate's already wounded heart. But instead of breaking her down, they only strengthened her resolve. "You're right about one thing," Kate said, meeting Camilla's gaze directly. "I never did learn to see people as chess pieces to be moved around for political advantage. I never learned to smile while destroying someone else's happiness. And I never learned to use children as weapons in family disputes." Camilla's face flushed slightly, but her smile remained in place. "How naive you still are. The children aren't weapons, Kate. They're the future of the monarchy, and the monarchy is bigger than any one person's happiness." Before Kate could respond, another knock came at the door. This time, it was William, dressed in his formal naval uniform, looking every inch the future king he was destined to become. His face was grave, and Kate could see the stress of the past few weeks etched in the lines around his eyes. "Camilla," he said, his tone carefully neutral, "I didn't expect to find you here." "I was just having a lovely chat with Kate," Camilla replied smoothly, wishing her well for the transition ahead. William's eyes moved between the two women, and Kate could see that he sensed the tension in the room. She wondered if he knew about his stepmother's plans for their children, if he was complicit in this attempt to further isolate her from royal life. "It's time," William said quietly. "The cars are waiting." Kate nodded, gathering her purse and coat. She would ride separately to the location where they would make their public statement, maintaining the facade of unity even as they announced their separation to the world. As they prepared to leave the room, Camilla paused beside Kate and spoke in a voice so low that only she could hear. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, dear. Accept the arrangements gracefully, and everyone will remember you fondly. Fight them, and you'll find that royal memories can be remarkably short." Kate felt a chill run down her spine, but she kept her expression neutral. She was beginning to understand just how ruthless the royal family could be when their interests were threatened, even by one of their own. The ride to the location was silent. Kate alone in the back of a sleek black car, while William traveled in another vehicle behind her. She watched the familiar streets of London pass by, wondering if she would ever see them the same way again. These were the streets where she had walked as a duchess, where crowds had cheered her name and children had waved British flags as her car passed. Now she was about to become just Kate Middleton again, no longer Her Royal Highness, no longer the future Queen of England. The title that had once felt like such an honor now felt like a weight being lifted from her shoulders, even as it broke her heart to lose it. The venue was a small, elegant room in a government building, chosen specifically to avoid the grandeur of a palace setting. The media had been told only that the Duke and Duchess would be making a joint statement about their family's future. Speculation had been building for weeks, but the palace had managed to keep the details from leaking. Kate entered through a side door, avoiding the crowd of photographers and reporters gathered at the main entrance. She was led to a small waiting room where she could compose herself before the cameras started rolling. Her hands were steady now, her breathing calm. She had made peace with what was about to happen. William appeared a few minutes later, and for a moment they looked at each other across the room like strangers. The easy intimacy that had once existed between them seemed like something from another lifetime. "Are you ready for this?" he asked softly. Kate nodded. "Are you?" He didn't answer immediately, and she could see the conflict in his eyes. Part of him still loved her, she knew that. But the part that was destined to be king had already begun to see her as an obstacle to overcome, rather than a partner to cherish. "The children are watching at home," William said finally. "I told them we would explain everything when we get back." The thought of facing George, Charlotte, and Louis after this public announcement made Kate's chest tight with anxiety. How do you explain to children that sometimes grown-ups make decisions that hurt everyone involved because they believe it's for the best? A palace aide knocked on the door. "Your Royal Highnesses, it's time." They walked down the corridor together one last time, their footsteps echoing in the silence. At the door to the main room, William paused and looked at her. "Kate, I want you to know—" "Don't," she interrupted gently. "We've said everything we need to say." The door opened, and they were greeted by a sea of camera flashes and the murmur of reporters. Kate and William took their places behind a simple podium, the British flag serving as the only decoration behind them. William stepped forward to read the statement that had been carefully crafted by palace lawyers and communications specialists. His voice was steady and formal as he announced that he and the Duchess had decided to separate after much consideration and discussion. Kate stood slightly behind him, her hands clasped in front of her, her expression serene despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. She looked every inch the dignified royal she had been trained to be, even as her world crumbled around her. When William finished speaking, they both answered a few carefully vetted questions from the press. Kate's voice remained steady as she spoke about their commitment to co-parenting and their respect for each other's decisions. But inside, she was screaming. As the press conference concluded and they prepared to leave, Kate caught sight of a familiar figure in the back of the room. Camilla had come to watch the announcement, and as their eyes met across the crowded space, Kate saw something that made her blood run cold. Camilla was smiling, not the polite public smile she wore for cameras, but a genuine expression of satisfaction. She looked like someone who had just won a long, difficult game, and Kate realized with dawning horror that to Camilla that's exactly what this had been. A game. A competition for influence over William and, by extension, the future of the monarchy. And Kate had just lost. The final confrontation came 6 months later, on a gray December morning that seemed to match the bleakness in Kate's heart. She had been living in her new home, a beautiful but modest house in Windsor, trying to build a new life for herself and maintain some sense of normalcy for the children during their time with her. The custody arrangements that had seemed reasonable during their civilized discussions had slowly become a weapon wielded against her. William's schedule was increasingly packed with royal duties that somehow always seemed to conflict with his time with the children. More often than not, George, Charlotte, and Louis ended up staying at Clarence's house with Charles and Camilla instead of spending weekends with their father. Kate had tried to address this through the proper channels, working with lawyers and palace officials, but every conversation ended the same way, with polite explanations about the demands of royal duty and gentle suggestions that perhaps it would be better for the children to have more consistency in their lives. The summons came on a Wednesday. Kate was requested to attend a family meeting at Clarence's house to discuss ongoing arrangements regarding the children. She knew it was a trap, but she couldn't refuse without seeming unreasonable or difficult. She dressed carefully that morning, choosing a navy blazer and gray trousers that projected confidence and competence. She wanted to look like the successful, independent woman she was trying to become, not like someone to be pitied or dismissed. The meeting was held in Charles's private study, a room Kate had only been in a handful of times during her marriage. Charles sat behind his antique desk, while Camilla occupied a chair positioned slightly behind him like a general's advisor. William stood by the window, his back to the room, refusing to meet Kate's eyes when she entered. "Kate, thank you for coming," Charles said, his voice formal but not unkind. "Please, sit down." Kate took the chair across from Charles's desk, feeling like she was facing a tribunal rather than her former family. The power dynamic in the room was clear, 3 of them against 1 of her, and William's refusal to even look at her told her everything she needed to know about whose side he had chosen. "We wanted to discuss the children's education and future arrangements," Charles continued. "As they get older, particularly George, there are certain expectations and responsibilities that need to be addressed." Kate had been expecting this conversation for months. George was 9 now, old enough to begin understanding his future role as a potential king. She knew the family would want to have more influence over his upbringing, but she hadn't expected them to be quite so direct about it. "What exactly are you proposing?" Kate asked, keeping her voice steady. Camilla leaned forward slightly, her expression sympathetic but firm. "We've been thinking that it might be beneficial for the children to have a more structured environment during the week as well. George, especially, would benefit from being immersed in royal protocols and traditions on a daily basis." The words hit Kate like a physical blow. They were suggesting taking her children away from her entirely, wrapping it in language about education and royal duty, but the intention was clear. "No," Kate said immediately. "Absolutely not." Charles's expression hardened. "Kate, please understand that this isn't personal. This is about what's best for the children and for the monarchy. George is 3rd in line to the throne. His education and upbringing are matters of national importance." Kate felt her carefully maintained composure begin to crack. "His upbringing is a matter of motherly importance." These are my children, Charles. Not the monarchy's children, not the nation's children. Mine. William finally turned from the window, and Kate saw guilt and anguish in his face. But when he spoke, his words cut her deeply. They're royal children, Kate. They always have been. That comes with responsibilities you've never fully understood. The accusation stung because it echoed all of Kate's deepest insecurities about her place in the royal family. Despite 12 years of marriage and 3 children together, William was still suggesting that she was an outsider who couldn't comprehend the weight of royal duty. "I've understood perfectly," Kate replied, her voice rising despite her attempts to stay calm. "I've understood that being royal means your children become chess pieces in a political game. I've understood that being royal means pretending that duty matters more than love. What I've never understood is how you can all live with yourselves." Camilla's facade of sympathy dropped completely. "That kind of emotional outburst is exactly why this arrangement isn't working, Kate. The children need stability, not drama." Kate turned to look at Camilla directly, and all the rage and frustration of the past months finally boiled over. "You want to talk about drama? Let's talk about how you've been undermining my relationship with my own children since the day I married William. Let's talk about how you've filled their heads with ideas about their mother not being royal enough for them. Let's talk about how you've turned my own husband against me because you couldn't stand the idea that someone like me might actually succeed in this family." Camilla's face went white with fury, but before she could respond, Kate continued. "You think I don't know what you've been doing? You think I don't see the way you smile when I'm struggling? The way you whisper in Charles's ear about my unsuitability? The way you've made it clear to everyone in this family that I was never welcome here?" "Kate, that's enough," William said sharply, but Kate was beyond caring about his disapproval. "No, it's not enough," she shot back, turning her anger on him. "You want to know what's enough? Enough is standing by while your stepmother destroys your wife's relationship with her own children. Enough is choosing duty over love so consistently that you forget they don't have to be mutually exclusive. Enough is allowing your family to treat the mother of your children like an inconvenient mistake that needs to be managed." The room fell silent. The only sound Kate's heavy breathing as she struggled to regain control of her emotions. She had said things that couldn't be taken back, crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. But she was tired of being diplomatic, tired of being the bigger person while her life was systematically dismantled. Charles was the first to speak, his voice cold with royal displeasure. "I think this conversation demonstrates exactly why the current arrangements aren't working. The children need a stable, rational environment, not one filled with emotional outbursts and accusations." Kate laughed bitterly. "Emotional outbursts? I'm fighting for my children. If that seems emotional to you, then maybe you've forgotten what it means to be a parent instead of just a royal." Camilla stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I won't sit here and be insulted by someone who clearly never learned her place in this family." "My place?" Kate rose to face her, and for the first time in 12 years, she abandoned all pretense of royal decorum. "My place was supposed to be as William's wife and the mother of his children. My place was supposed to be as a member of this family. But you made sure that never happened, didn't you? You couldn't stand the idea that a middle-class girl might actually make William happy." "Happiness is a luxury royals can't afford," Camilla snapped back, her own composure finally cracking. "William has responsibilities that go far beyond your little domestic fantasy. He's going to be king, and he needs a partner who understands what that means, not someone who thinks love conquers all." Kate felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of these people who would see them as weakness. "You're right," she said quietly. "Love doesn't conquer all, but it should mean something. It should count for something. The fact that it doesn't in this family is exactly why I can't be part of it anymore." She turned to William, who had been watching the exchange with growing horror. "You have a choice to make, William. You can choose to be a father to your children, or you can choose to be what they want you to be. But you can't have both, and you certainly can't have them at my expense anymore." William's face was pale, but when he spoke, Kate knew she had already lost him completely. "The children will be better off with consistent royal guidance," he said, his voice sounding rehearsed. "This isn't about taking them away from you, Kate. It's about giving them the foundation they need for their future roles." Kate felt something break inside her chest, something that had been cracking for months, finally splitting completely apart. This was the man she had loved since she was 19 years old, the father of her children, and he was choosing institutional duty over their family. "Then I suppose we have nothing more to discuss," she said, her voice eerily calm. She moved toward the door, but Camilla's voice stopped her. "Kate." The older woman's tone was almost gentle now, but there was steel underneath it. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Accept the new arrangements gracefully, and you'll still have a relationship with your children. Fight us, and you'll find that royal resources can be quite overwhelming for a private citizen." Kate turned back one last time, and Camilla saw something in her eyes that made the older woman step back slightly. "Is that a threat?" Kate asked quietly. Camilla's smile was cold and victorious. "It's a reality. You're not a royal anymore, Kate. You have no power here, no influence, no protection. The children belong to the crown now." Kate felt the last of her composure shatter, and tears finally began to fall down her cheeks. But her voice remained steady as she delivered her final words to the royal family. "You can take my title, you can take my position, you can even take my children, but you can't take the fact that I am their mother, and that I love them more than any crown or institution ever could. Someday, when they're old enough to understand what happened here, they'll know who fought for them and who traded them away for political convenience." She looked at William one last time, her heart breaking all over again at the sight of his anguished face. "And someday, when you're king and you're surrounded by all the duty and tradition and protocol you chose over love, I hope you remember that there was once someone who loved you just for being you, not for what you represented." Kate walked out of Clarence's house with as much dignity as she could muster, but as soon as the door closed behind her, she collapsed against the wall and sobbed. She cried for the marriage that had failed, for the children she was losing, and for the naive young woman who had believed that love could bridge any gap and overcome any obstacle. Behind the closed door, Camilla turned to William with satisfaction clearly written across her features. "Well," she said, smoothing her skirt, "I think that went rather well." William stared at the door through which Kate had just exited, feeling like he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. But the weight of his future crown was already settling back on his shoulders, reminding him that personal happiness was indeed a luxury he couldn't afford. Camilla walked past him toward the door, pausing to pat his arm in what might have been meant as comfort. "You did the right thing, William," she said. "The children will understand when they're older. Kate will find someone more suitable for her lifestyle, and you'll find someone who truly understands what it means to be royal." As Camilla left the room with Charles, William caught sight of her reflection in the window. She was smiling, a genuine expression of triumph that made his stomach turn. He realized that to her, Kate hadn't been a family member who needed support during a difficult time. She had been an enemy to be defeated, a threat to be eliminated, and he had helped her do it. Outside, Kate sat in her car for a long time before starting the engine. She would have to go home and explain to her children why their living arrangements were about to change again. She would have to find the strength to rebuild her life once more, this time without the royal protection and resources she had grown accustomed to. But as she finally drove away from Clarence's house, Kate felt something she hadn't experienced in years: freedom. She was no longer bound by royal protocols or expectations. She was no longer trapped in a marriage that had become a prison. She was just Kate again, and maybe that was enough. Behind her, the palace loomed in her rearview mirror, growing smaller with each mile. She didn't look back.